So, guys, do you remember in Halloween 6 when we see Mrs. Blankenship in her living room and she starts telling Danny about, like, what Halloween was all about? I got myself a jumbo pumpkin, and what I want to do is carve that pumpkin that you see flashing behind her on, like, a stand or something. I loved that design when I saw it in the movie, and I really want to recreate that. So be sure you're following me on Instagram and stuff like that. That way you can see the final product. I'm going to work on that tonight. Guys, listen, like, for once, I am genuinely in the Halloween mood. I've kind of, like, held off from watching these movies for a while, so I've really just been enjoying them and watching them completely out of sequence in typical CHH fashion. But I want to talk to you guys today a little bit about Halloween 6. And kind of I want to talk about both cuts, because what I did tonight was I watched the producer's cut, and yesterday I watched the theatrical cut. I want to talk about which cut I think is better, and in a couple of ways, like which one do I enjoy more and which one is better on 4K, which is an interesting thing to discuss because, you know, not only do we have different scenes in these cuts, but like visually they go in different directions kind of. The theatrical cut really wants to push it in terms of the visual style of the stuff we see, and that's going to be interesting to talk about. But listen, I love Halloween 6. I don't think this is a masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination, but watching this movie again, I can't help but feel a grander scope, a grander feel in this movie over 4 and 5. You know, people have said that 4 and 5 feel like Lifetime movies or HBO Showtime movies or just made for TV movies. I agreed with that until these movies came out on 4K. On 4K, I thought 4 and 5 actually looked good, like it made them look like real movies. So I wouldn't really necessarily agree with that anymore, but Halloween 6 always had this very larger than life, big, grand scope feel. And there's a lot of things that I love about H6, and I think there's a lot of things that the Halloween fans really can grasp onto. And if you're like me, one of the most important factors in watching a Halloween film is, does it make it feel like the holiday? And I have no issue saying I think Halloween 6 is the most Halloween-esque feeling movie out of all of them. When we see the camera pan down where it's in morning time, but you've already got kids kind of trick-or-treating, and then you see John Strode just enough with the Michael Myers bullshit scene. Oh my God, the feels in that shot are amazing. I love that so much. So like I said, I watched the theatrical cut yesterday and I watched the producer's cut tonight. And here's the thing. For a while, for a long time, I was very vocal that I'm a producer's cut guy. And here's the thing. Part of it might be because I was watching the theatrical cut for so long. I was so accustomed to it. I never had a bootleg version of this movie like a lot of people did. So watching the producer's cut for me, really watching it, was when the box set for the Blu-rays came out, and that was 10 years ago. So from that point on, I was very vocal that I love the producer's cut, and I do like it. I have issues with it, but I did really enjoy it, and it was kind of like the new kid on the block for me, so it had that appeal of being the fresh new cut of the film for me. Watching the producer's cut, I will say I do like some of the scenes that we have in here. Like the way they expand the opening scene, I think is good. There's a little bit less mystery with that nurse who really tries to help Jamie get her baby out and stuff like that. And we get the sense already that that man in black is right there, ready to get the baby and stuff like that. So it's a little bit more expanded. And visually on 4K, that's a great thing. I mean, that part looks really great on the 4K, and I like that a lot. And the stuff that's cool about this movie on the producer's cut, I'll never forget this, because Donald Pleasence had already passed long by then. I think he passed immediately after this film was wrapping, maybe either that or after he kind of got done doing some ADR work for the movie. But the stuff we get with Loomis, the extra bits and pieces with Loomis, it's hard to judge that in terms of how it works into the scope of the movie, because it's so endearing seeing him. And the thing about Loomis in The Curse, regardless of the cuts, is his tempo is a little bit slower, and he's he's an old man. He really gives the impression of being a senior citizen. Not so much in 4 and 5, because he's still kind of like crazy, and we has scenes in that movie where he has stunt doubles that get knocked out of windows, and he gets punched by Myers and stuff. So he has a little bit of feebleness still in 4 and 5. The cadence and rhythm of Loomis in 6 is something that's so endearing, and I think a lot of us can't help but get a smile when we see and hear Loomis in 6. His voice is very calming. His voice is very relaxing to hear. And like, you just listen a little bit closer when you're watching 6 when he talks. And I think that's something that a lot of us can really grab onto. So with the producer's cut, the thing that I don't feel really works in here is a couple things. The way Jamie Lloyd gets taken out in the producer's cut, I'm a horror fan. I like to see some spectacular things. And I think the way she gets killed in the theatrical cut with those farming tools, those spikes that go up and down, that is intense, and that is a visceral Michael Myers moment. And me personally, like, I like the kind of more brute, intense Myers. So the way she gets killed, like in the hospital and everything, it's not bad, but I definitely prefer her, exit of the movie in the way it happens in the theatrical cut. That's just a personal taste for me right there. The other thing that I don't really like in the film, now listen, let me just say this. I think in horror, you should push the boundaries. You should do things that makes your audience uncomfortable. The whole thing of Michael being the father of the kid in this movie, it's as weird as it sounds. Like, if there was a little bit more meat on the bone in that in the story, maybe I could see a reason why to have that in there, but it's really even not talked about that much except by a couple of lines. And to me, it honestly just feels out of place in the movie. I don't really understand it. So it's not necessarily so much that I'm a prude and it's just like, whatever. It's like, yeah, I get it. Michael's under this cult. There's a lot of elements that are introduced in 6 that I'm down with, but that I more so scratch my head at it rather than say, oh my God, you're kidding me. So that I've worn that off a little bit. I've worn off on that a little bit, so I don't really like that. The producer's cut, here's the good thing about the producer's cut, I will say. When the Blu-ray came out from Scream Factory, there were moments in the producer's cut where you had these sharp blue lines on the screen. They weren't there too often, but they were there, and honestly, they were annoying as hell. The cool thing about the 4K is they finally got it seamless. The producer's cut on 4K from this release is absolutely seamless, and more than makes the cut of this film enjoyable to watch. I think this scene is overblown as some sort of like a joke. The scene where Tommy Doyle actually puts out the rocks and does the ritual to stop Michael dead in his tracks. It's not as hokey as I think people make it out to be on screen. Like, yes, he has to pull all the rocks out and stuff, but I always forget he has to do a blood sacrifice. So he cuts his hand, he rubs it inside the circle, and then it says Sam Hain to Michael, and Michael stops. It goes in line, I think, with that kind of old school ritualistic cult stuff that is with the movie, and I just feel like that scene is not as hokey as people make it out to be when they laugh or joke about it. On the movie, I think it looks pretty cool. The thing about the producer's cut that has my jaw always kind of on the floor a little bit is when we see Michael transfer with the doctor that is running the whole cult operation, and then the spell gets passed on to Loomis. We hear that iconic scream, which is the last thing we've ever heard from Loomis. So to me, it's almost like Loomis is somewhere stuck in hell still with this curse of thorn on him. But that shot of Michael in the Man in Black suit, and you see him walking down this blue corridor, this blue lit corridor, I am more than intrigued at where they could have gone after that. I think it's fitting that we never did carry that on, because that mystery, we never really even the producer's cut, I still have questions about this whole thing, how it all started, how this, there's still always going to be questions I have about it. So maybe it's best that we never truly get the answer to what's next. But I definitely look at 6 as the true ending to me. And the reality is, in horror, sometimes you're never going to have that answer. So I like the producer's cut still. I have some issues with it. Overall, I still think it's a good cut. Now, I'll be honest with you. Going back and watching the theatrical cut yesterday for this, I liked it way more than I ever remembered. I think the roles have kind of turned. I've really worn the producer's cut out for myself. So going back to the theatrical cut, I do like the tempo of this movie a little bit better. I feel like the theatrical cut has a little bit quicker of a pace to it, and I do really like the latter scenes in this movie. They are definitely weird as well and interesting to see, but the scenes of Michael, where you have that other gentleman that's playing Michael, that's not George P. Wilbur, he does a lot of scenes. He's got a slimmer waist, slimmer build. There are some really great chase scenes in that, and one of the coolest things about this cut for me is definitely the running down the hall scene with the red lights. When I watched that on 4K for the first time, I said to myself, now I can see how these reshoots that they did are really beneficial to us, the viewers, because on 4K, guys, if you don't own this and you haven't seen this, when you see Michael going pretty quick down that corridor, chasing him out, and they get behind the gate, that whole sequence right there is a jaw-dropping sequence on 4K, and I really like that. There's always going to be issues with this movie. I like Paul Rudd in this movie, but some of his facial expressions just crack me up. The scene at the end, the battle scene, about the same level of weird in its own way as the whole producer's cut ending, because of just how strange Paul Rudd is, right? But overall, there's this feeling of finality in a weird way. The way it cuts to them saying, come with us, and Loomis saying, I have business to attend to here, and then you don't see what happens except you see the mask on the floor. There's a little bit of, even though it's more ambiguous, in my heart, I feel like there's a little bit more of a real closing of the book, and Loomis is gone, and Myers took his mask off to take Loomis out, maybe in a sign of respect. I don't know. I've heard people say that before on the internet, and I think I can agree with that. I think that's a cool thing to think about. But overall, I gotta say, when it comes to a viewing experience, I definitely prefer the theatrical cut of this movie. And one of the reasons I definitely prefer the theatrical cut in a different way is the Brother Kane Fool Shine On song. I don't think is in the producer's cut at all, if memory serves. It definitely didn't play at the end credits, and I don't remember it playing in the scene where the college kids, the sister and the brother, they're kind of walking over the hill. It doesn't play there either, and that Fool Shine On song is so important to most of us. So I think I prefer the theatrical cut. There are some things about the producer's cut I like, but overall, after all the dust is settled, after 10 years of officially having the producer's cut and having these cuts on 4K, I think if I'm going to watch one, I think the theatrical cut is really the way to go. I didn't think I would say that after all this time, but I just really enjoyed watching this film again. I just put a big smile on my face, and it's been some time since I've revisited it. It was just a great experience, and I really enjoyed going back and forth. The cool thing is they're different enough to where you can watch both of them and not feel like you're like, oh, I got to watch this again, because there are definitely different scenes, there's different twists and turns, and it's a different movie damn near. So that's another reason I think Halloween 6 is so unique and so special. This was the heartbeat before really horror's grunge kicked in with Scream, and what I mean by that is the trendsetter, right? This is the heartbeat before that, so this movie is really a time capsule for a very, very specific moment in time as well. So I'm interested to see what you guys think after all this time. Now that the dust is settled with the producer's cut being out officially for 10 years now, how do you feel about the cuts? Which cut do you prefer? For me, I am a theatrical cut guy again, and it is what it is. I still like the producer's cut, but between the two, man, I had such a great time watching the theatrical cut on 4K and hearing Brother Kane and seeing those red lit hall scenes and all that stuff. It was great. So there you have it, guys. I wanted to talk about Curse of Michael Myers today because I just had a great time watching it. So now I'm going to go and try to carve that pumpkin that's flashing behind Mrs. Blankenship in The Curse of Michael Myers. I'm going to see how close I can get it. But for now, this is your old pal CHH saying Halloween 6 is the real end of the Halloween franchise. See you guys next time. Huge giant thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Without you guys, this would not be possible. To get behind the scenes photos, videos, music, private live streams, and much more, you can subscribe to my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Thank you to my patrons.